Okay, so I'm just going to go in a quick summary and look at the art of the Middle Ages with you all. Um, so first, how do we say what is the Middle Ages? We're going to say that it's between the Roman Empire, which we just ended into chapter 3.1, and it's just before you get into the Renaissance. This is where we are on the map. We have Europe, Middle East, and North Africa primarily. And then let's talk a little bit about religion. We have Judaism in the Middle Ages. We have Christianity becomes a more dominant and powerful religion following the Roman Empire. So we'll see a lot of that. Let's first look at this. This is some of the oldest surviving monotheistic artworks. It's Jewish. It's in a Jewish synagogue. And what we have here are narratives that come from the Torah, or you could say the Old Testament. And these are didactic in nature, which means that they are educational. They're used as a learning tool. And here's just another image. And this is what it looks like on the exterior of the synagogue. And then I wanted to show you this one. Okay, so this is Exodus and the crossing of the Red Sea. This is actually a great example of the continuous narrative. And what that means is, in one scene, we have two stories. It is the ongoing story of Moses, where Moses takes his people, God's chosen people, out of Egypt where they were enslaved. And when he takes them out, with permission finally from the Egyptian Pharaoh, he comes to the Red Sea. The story is that he parts the Red Sea. God tells him to raise his staff, and the walls are parted so they can walk on dry land across the Red Sea. And then the Egyptian Pharaoh changes his mind, and he sends his army, which you see here on the left, to chase them down. And this over here is Moses, and this is that part of the story. Well, once Moses and his people are safely across, Moses is told to move his staff again, and the walls of water collapse, drowning, as you can see right here, the Egyptians. So that's kind of like past and present, all in the same scene. And if you look above, you can see where Yahweh, or God's hands, are present, showing that his sovereignty is there, that he was with them through the whole event. Okay, so I'm going to keep going just because we have a little bit of time. And in these videos, I just try not to make it last too long for you and keep it under 10 minutes. But, let's see. We are going to go to here. We're now in the Middle Ages during the Byzantine period. If you look at this painting, you'll see there's gold in it. It probably has a lot of gold leaf is found in this time. Gold is iconic. Icon means it stands in for a symbol. That's because it's a very expensive gold, so it's precious. So if there's gold on the object or around that person or figure, they're precious. They're significant. And then also gold reflects light, and we always think of light as being holy. So in this image, we have a halo disc around Mary, who is holding the Christ child, Jesus, and has saints on her sides. It's a pretty symmetrical composition, really. The figures we're staying in the classical tradition, because we started that in the Roman Empire, and now we're in classical, continuing on into the Middle Ages. And what I mean is it's recognizable. We can tell we're seeing a woman holding a child. We see men off to her side. At this time, this was, a really great craftsmanship and technique. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to add on this. Is I mentioned icons and the halos and the gold, and she is always featured in like almost a navyish blue with some red usually, and those are like the iconic colors for Mary. A Jewish, no, excuse me, a new Christian kind of like a denomination, there are various ones at this time, took to the second commandment in a similar way that Jews had previously or Jews still do today, that the second commandment coming from um, the Ten Commandments that Moses was given from God. And that second commandment says, do not make idols to worship. And so they thought, okay, if someone makes an image of Mary or Jesus, they're worshiping that image. They're not worshiping the real Jesus. So iconoclasm occurs. And here's the word I'm saying, iconoclast. And several Christians would actually go and destroy other people that would say they were also Christian in their images because they thought it was idolatry. And that goes on for, as it says here, 8th and 9th century. So that's a long span of time of a lot of destroyed artworks. Okay. Next, what I want to look at is a reliquary with you. And this is it. A reliquary, it just means that it's like usually an object, or it could actually be or could have the possession of body parts from a holy person. In this case, we're talking about a saint, but if we were talking about relics from parts of Africa, it's probably their ancestors, because they believe their ancestors were like holy figures. So here we have an actual skull, the head of Saint Alexander, inside of this sculpture. You can tell it's beautifully adorned with jewels, as it's silver, repousse, gilt bronze, so very expensive materials. These would have been in a lot of churches or later cathedrals, and people would actually take a pilgrimage to see these relics because they believe that the holy person's remains still holds some sense of power, like maybe healing or fertility perhaps. Okay. So now let's look at the Dome of the Rock. This is located in Jerusalem. It's sacred, this site, to three major religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. It's in possession of Muslims right now. And the Wailing Wall, which you might have heard of, where Orthodox Jews pray towards because of where they pray in a certain direction towards where the Temple Mount was. It's believed that inside of the Dome of the Rock, and here's just an earlier image of what it looked like in 1862, and here's the Wailing Wall where Orthodox Jews would go to pray. It has a rock, and you can see that in this illustration. I think I have an image here. It is the rock inside of the dome. That is what the whole building is for, is to protect this rock. It's believed that by many that Abraham would have offered his son Isaac as a sacrifice had he, had the angel not interrupted that, and maybe where Muhammad descended into heaven, and maybe was the other one where Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount. So there's a lot of different thoughts of like how significant and people passionately believing that that this is a sacred site to preserve. And of all three religions, people will take a pilgrimage, but of course you cannot enter into the Dome of the Rock unless you are practicing Islam at that. Let's see if I can. Okay. Now I want to look at Gothic with you. Gothic is usually we're talking about cathedrals. In this case, they are heavily adorned cathedrals. Like I just picked this one out because you can tell on the texture of the outside. It's full of relief sculptures, and the inside has beautiful artworks. The cathedral itself is a work of art, but it's Gothic because it's very tall and narrow. It has ribbed vaults and flying buttresses, which we learned some about in part 2. The Chartres Cathedral has the flying buttresses as support. We see the rose window, which is stained glass. A lot of stained glass because of those flying buttresses and ribbed vaults. They could have that stained glass and create a beautiful light source inside of it. In the very front here, we see a labyrinth. So those that could not take a pilgrimage to the Holy Land could get on their knees and pray in this way. It's like meditating and have the similar experience of going on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And here's just some Gothic artworks. You can still see a lot of the blues and the reds and the golden colors, Mary and Christ out enthroned, that just keeps on as subject matter. It's very consistent. You can see it here again. Okay, we're going to stop there for the Middle Ages.